Okay, so let's get underway, and welcome to the webinar on cost transformation. And thank you for those of you that have joined the session. I think we've got somewhere north of about 40 people now joined. So please do tell us where you're dialing in from, and perhaps also the journey that you're on. Please use the chat facility. As I mentioned, if you joined the session slightly earlier, we will be recording this and therefore connecting back afterwards. And following up. So if you've got particular questions, then please feel free to do that. We have a panel of people that are from different industries, so they're at different stages of the journey, so they're only too delighted to give their insight and share that with you. So my name's Steve Freshwater. When I'm not hosting webinars, my day job is working with clients across all industries really on their transformation journeys, really helping them to shape their transformation journeys and then realise a new level of performance as part of Capgemini Invent. Now, I'm joined today by several of my colleagues, from our international colleagues from our operations transformation team, and we're going to share our experiences of helping clients to transform their cost base and their operations across 4 different industries. I'll introduce them in a moment, but for those of you online, it'd be great to see if you could let us know if you've got any questions. As I mentioned, we'll try to factor them in as we go. We've already got about 10 questions in the bag as well, so we'll do that. So please use the online chat. Our agenda today is really, we'll set the context around what we see as the difference between cost transformation and cost reduction. And then we'll share experiences from the client's journey and how we're using 4 different levers now, along with our own methodology to help accelerate or boost programs and really lead to sustainable change. And in the process, we'll look to answer your questions. Now, I'm joined on this journey by several of my colleagues, as I mentioned. You will be hearing later from Susan Davis, who's part of our consumer products team. So she leads a lot of companies helping think through their supply chain operations, how they can implement some of the new technologies and leverage a much better cost base. Susan in particular has been working, and she'll share experiences with a large global consumer products company right now, helping to implement touchless planning, and she'll explain a little bit more about that, but actually just eliminating the human elements of perhaps a decision making along the process. So, and at the same time, looking at consolidating an overall view. So she'll give a view about that for what is actually one of the world's supply chain masters, according to Gartner, around that. So that's Susan. I'm also joined by Joe. Now, Joe spends his life, Joe Murray spends his life in financial services, and he spent the last 3 years or so working with one of the UK's largest retailing banks, dealing with their remediation program. A huge task in itself of making sure that the corrective actions are put in place and handling a vast number of customer challenges and understanding and setting up processes that can really support a new level of customer service and correcting some of the challenges they have. So Joe will talk about that journey and what he sees particularly, and also some of the methods. I'm then also joined by Etienne Piolet, who is our global leader of cost transformation. Around that, Etienne is based in Paris, and he's working with financial institutions, manufacturing companies alike. And I think it'd be useful to get Etienne's view about an international context for cost transformation. Is there something different in the way that we see internationally? So we'll get a perspective on that. And finally, I'd like to move then to Chris Brannan. Chris spends his life in energy and utilities. He's been working on an award-winning program, actually, helping a large utility become a digital utility, leveraging the customer transformation story and digitization to really change as a step change for their operations and deliver better customer services. And that's been recognized at an award-winning level. So we'll focus on a broad spectrum of different market sectors. But we'd like to, Chris, I think one of the questions I think around there is, there's lots of drivers to reduce cost. What's driving it right now? I mean, clearly COVID has an impact. What are you seeing?
Yeah, thanks, Steve. Hello, everyone. Can you okay?
Yeah, we can.
Yeah,
welcome.
Excellent. Absolutely, Steve. So I think we can continue to see many drivers which are shaping cost transformation across markets, and obviously we view that many of those are quite by definition sector specific in their own right. And if I'm being honest, I don't think COVID itself has really changed those drivers per se. But what COVID has done is it certainly shone a light on, and indeed the fragility of many operating models, and many organisations now question themselves on just how operationally resilient are we? How do I get a better level of cost control within my organization, and how do I build up that level of resilience? So what COVID has really done is helped open up that question a bit more. Are we as resilient as we thought we probably were before we entered into this situation? And that's really the way that we as Capgemini like to think about it. How can we help organizations drive that level of what we call strategic cost resilience? How do I build up that resilience in my operating model and help transform my cost base? And as we see it, there are 5 key drivers which are driving that trend just now. The first of which we're all probably now well familiar with, both in our daily lives and our working lives, is what we call the digital shift. We're all becoming very familiar with digital transformation now, which is pervasive across a number of industries, and the increasing move of social, mobile, analytic, and cloud, or otherwise known as SMAC technologies, which are fundamentally transforming businesses. And we know through our research, for example, with the MIT, that those organizations who increasingly leverage digital in their operations are 26% more profitable than their industry counterparts. So there's key advantage to leveraging digital and adopting that digital shift. The next 2 drivers which we see are indeed somewhat interlinked, so new business models and new entrants. I guess what we're seeing is new business models and new entrants emerge who at the face of it are more agile and flexible than probably their industry counterparts. So having that level of adaptability has helped them become more resilient in their way of operations. We're all now very familiar with the kind of Ubers, the Airbnbs, the Netflixes, who by definition have been born digital, but entered into a market very quickly and very, very quickly capitalized on that market share, being more cost effective than many of their kind of counterparts within that industry. Clearly, cost pressure is in there, and cost pressure continues to rise across a number of industry sectors, and that will always be there. As I mentioned, COVID hasn't necessarily changed that, but it certainly heightened that. So we've seen that revenues have been squeezed more, costs have increased, so that margin has really been squeezed ever tighter, which necessitates a level of cost transformation in our business. And finally, it'd be kind of remiss of us not to acknowledge shifting expectations or changing expectations. We know that both customers and employees have a greater level of expectation on their organizations, both in terms of sustainability, but what they demand by way of service. So that's necessitating a shift in the business models of many organizations. So really, as we see there across the bottom of the slide at the kicker there, where previously we saw across industries growth and sustainability as being key business drivers for improving operations, I think what we're seeing now is that cost management and resilience are representing the new organizational focus, and COVID has really kind of brought that to life, with the added challenge of ensuring sustainability is maintained as well.
Yeah, Chris, that's interesting. I just had a question come in. I think one of the questions that someone's asking, what's the difference between cost transformation and cost reduction? I mean, is there a difference?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a question we're often asked around what exactly is that difference. I think for us within Capgemini, there are 2 differences. When we look at saving or cost reduction or cost out versus cost transformation, effectively one, i.e. the cost reduction or cost out programs, they are typically what we see as quite short-termist. They're typically quite tactical improvements on very siloed parts of the process. And they're typically purely focused on cost out, so ignoring kind of maybe the customer service dimension or the sustainability dimension. When we look at cost transformation, on the other hand, we're really talking about something which is more long-term, more strategic, and really holding a light up to or a mirror up to the kind of operating model of the organization.
Okay, thank you, brilliant. Thanks, Chris. I guess one of the things as well is I mentioned it in the trailer about Etienne, who's part of our global team. Etienne, I mean, I guess what are you seeing from a European or a global perspective in terms of those cost cutting? Is that, as Chris said, is that the same sort of challenge that you see, or is there a different focus?
Well, what we can see, and you were referring to what we can read in the headlines, is that we hear a lot and mainly about big corporate announcements about FTEs reduction, production sites closures, or any other kind of activities restructuring. And this is more or less the same sound we hear from various geographies. But when we take a step back and looking at what's behind the scene, I would say, we can see quite different stories, and I will come back a bit later on perhaps what can be different within the various geographies. The different stories are, first of all, about the fact that what we see in the market is that around 70% of all those cost reduction or cost transformation plan or initiatives are overvalued, and usually because they are mainly top-down consideration, usually really organizational centric, and not taking into consideration how to make this change really from an operational point of view sustainable and how to make it happen. And this is exactly the difference Chris was just talking about before.
Yeah.
The second story, which is a bit different between what we see in the headlines and the reality, is the fact that the way our clients and the big corporates are steering and following the benefits and savings of such kind of plan is usually a big issue and a big improvement area. Just to give you a figure, we estimate that at least 30% of the total targeted savings that are announced on the news are missed or are not materialized in the P&L because of poor benefit tracking or a poor capacity to really move from a really top-down perspective to something that will happen in the real life. Last but not least, and you know this is something important for me, Steve, the people aspect, the people adoption of this kind of plan or initiatives. We always heard about, we always hear about strong and difficult discussions between executives and employees. What we see in the market is that for those who want to really enter a sustainable change and something that will lead not only to short-term improvement, but mid to long-term and sustainable improvement, the local adoptions and the people adoptions is absolutely key and is one of the major milestones on the critical path. In consequence of that, we believe, and I think it's a really strong positioning, that we need to address the combination of those three dimensions for mastering this kind of plan. A strategic vision of what's the market evolution, where we want to go, but also in terms of value, in terms of positioning in front of our customers. A financial approach to build, I would say, an impactful roadmap for the employees, but also for the shareholders. And last but not least, to build a strong operational approach to ensure, first of all, that we maximize the benefits and the value, and for all the employees as well, and to make this change a real sustainable transformation.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point around that sustainability. And I think one of the challenge, I guess, with COVID, and there's a lot of, as you say in the press, there's a lot of knee-jerk reactions to take out cost. And I guess at the end of the day, taking out cost without thinking about the customer ahead of time and on what the impact will be could lead to even bigger problems, I guess within that. Is that something you also see internationally as well, with countries that perhaps ahead of us perhaps ahead of the UK in the cycle with COVID?
Well, I think what is important and what I see in the market, it's not. I would not insist on differences, but more to learn from what we've seen, for example, coming from China or Asia. They probably have, let's say, around one month ahead of us when we talk about the unlock and lockdown and the new normal period, I would say. And we've seen a very interesting trends and dynamics. If I just give you 2 or 3 examples, we have seen, for example, with Starbucks in China, the fact that they really learned from the COVID-19 period and the real challenge they had to restructure their processes to just build a new way and a new operating model to interact with their customers on a daily basis, which is not only a cost reduction purpose, but which is more for resilience and sustainability purpose. Just another example, talking about automotive actors in Asia. they realized that in their P&L and in their cost categories, a huge amount of money was spent to sell and to promote the new vehicles and the new options and configurations. And they identified during the COVID-19 period that, for example, live streaming approach can be really interesting, not only for reducing cost once again, but also to propose their customers a new experience and a new way to enter the world of their brand. So that's very interesting, I would say, feedback we learned from Asia, from the East. And it's not just about what they did, it's the DNA and the dynamic which is behind that, being not just focused on cost reduction, but creating new operating models that are more resilient and more customer-centric in the meantime.
Brilliant. I think that's something that we see a lot, and I guess many of our clients are thinking, have been foresighted enough to start their digital journey earlier, but now if they weren't convinced about the need for it, I think many of them are now saying digital is a strong reason to change. With that, Joe, are you online there? Thank you, SEN. Joe, you coming off mute?
Hi, Steve. Thank you. Thank you for the introduction.
Just from our perspective, I mean, you've been working, as I mentioned earlier, in financial services. You're seeing a lot of changes, I guess, in that industry and cost around that. There's been lots of talk of top-down initiatives and 10% reductions, 20% in headcount, and so on. What's the approach you're adopting, and what's the difference, I guess, around that?
Oh yeah, so thank you, Steve. So actually, it's quite an interesting revolutionary time within financial services and cost transformation. And actually, what we're seeing is a lot of companies are starting to reassess what their North Star is. So they are focusing on their customers and what their true North Star should be, and then working backwards, just like Amazon are customer centric, starting with customer and working backwards. So we're working with a lot of clients and a lot of financial services institutions that are actually using our unique ESOR approach of eliminate, standardize, optimize, automate, and roboticize. We go in, we look at what the true North Star should be with the customer and work backwards. And we apply 4 lenses, which we believe is the best way to go about cost transformation. And we look at the customer, we work back through those 4 lenses, and then we design the best op model, processes, and technologies to serve the customers. And what we find is this approach improves customer experience, it transforms operations and innovates, and it permanently reduces costs and transforms the cost base permanently and sustainably. And what I'll do now is just give a quick overview of what we're seeing in financial services, but they are pretty market agnostic, and the 4 lenses. So the first lens that we apply is intelligent process optimization. And interestingly, I will put a COVID spin on each one of these and what COVID has really accelerated. So we know that this is quite a mature offering, but actually what COVID has shown is either through staff absenteeism or sheer volume of applicants or customers going through the processes, systems and companies have been overwhelmed. So they are now looking at RPA and looking at intelligent automation solutions, not necessarily to reduce costs in the short term, but actually to build in digital resilience and improve process reliability and therefore increase customer experience. We know that this technology is proven, and what companies and what clients are looking for now are partners who can deliver this end-to-end, which obviously Capgemini can. This significant increase in demand is also focusing more on data and intelligence-led optimization through processes such as process mining and using some of our partners and our infrastructure there. So actually, the focus on process optimization has really grown exponentially, and obviously savings in there because of RPA release employees to be able to concentrate in different areas of the bank, particularly in this crisis. So really interesting development there.
So Joe, the days of the sort of brown paper, the value stream map, are they numbered now, or is it, what I'm hearing is it's much more data driven. It's about gathering the information you've got and then making optimization around that content.
Well, yeah, it's using data to inform decisions, but actually being agile in the way that you develop your streams. So you're effectively relentless on your North Star and on your customer needs, and anything else actually you don't bother building into a value stream, and you reduce waste and cost that way, Steve.
Okay, thanks.
if that makes sense. The next one is obviously digital workforce and client interaction channels. And this has been the biggest area that we have seen a seismic shift. We're all sat at home, we're all working on Teams, and it's all been largely very effective. And both workforce and clients, importantly, have been forced into an accelerated digital interaction model. And what we're seeing, and and I'll give you an anecdotal story in a second, but what we're seeing, and more companies right now are looking at, can we employ digitization a little bit more? Can we reduce our real estate costs? Do we need to have these huge marquee offices? So to give you an example, one of our huge clients in the banking sector had started this journey over 2 years ago. Not only did they reduce their real estate costs by 75%, which was hundreds of millions the year after that they implemented it, but what they have found is throughout the COVID crisis, they've had more resilience because their systems are digitally enabled. They've been able to carry on conducting things such as contact centers, customer operations, because their network, which they have already built and invested in, gave them a lot more resilience to service customers. So again, that's proven, and that's proven for that company and that particular bank works. But actually, the cost savings and the cost transformation and the operational changes which will be required will be significant and allow them to be a lot more agile, a lot more flexible, whilst permanently changing their cost base into the future. The next lens we look through is legacy IT and cloud adoption. So many dated systems have been found inadequate lately to service clients. We've all seen the papers. Some banks, some financial institutions have done very well. Some have been in news for cutting off services with no explanation. And what companies are really understanding now is, unless you update these dated systems and move to more cutting edge technology and more innovation, you will not be able to keep up with the demands of your customers. And they can't do that with the current cost base, and they can't do that with the current infrastructure. So as a result of this, we are seeing significant demand for our Capgemini EAPM solution, which effectively we go in and we have a look with our partners and our clients at the end-to-end system design, and we utilize the most cutting edge, i.e. using cloud or new technologies to deliver the op model which serves clients and services the true North Star, which is always the customer best. But again, that strips out a lot of waste and excessive spend on legacy IT systems. But more importantly, it improves customer experience, it gives you more digital resilience, and it also gives you greater functionality, particularly with high volumes. The final lens which we concentrate on for the strategic cost transformation approach is outsourcing. Now, as a trained accountant, in the past, the traditional, and it still is the mentality, is you look at the functions that aren't core and you try to outsource them to be as cheap as you possibly can. And that's still going on now. Some clients are still looking at that. However, there is real cutting edge new thinking, which we're working with one of our clients with at the moment in this area. And let me just explain. So COVID, we all know the impacts of COVID, but one of the impacts for several clients along financial services and probably wider than just that market is some of the outsourced services and functions that they've contracted out have been interrupted by it. So what it's really introduced, which probably wasn't thought through significantly before, is the risk of interrupted operations, albeit even if they're not core. So some of our clients are looking at this and saying, wait a minute, this is a risk that we need to control internally. So we're looking at developing an innovative model where large multinational companies actually develop their own shared services outsourcing basis in strategic hubs and actually bring all of those outsourced services back. And not only is that great for the company itself, because it retains control, it gains greater resilience, but it also reduces the risk of an external provider and enables surety to customers. And the real silver lining is, once you've done the initial investment, the ongoing sustainable cost base is reduced because you're not paying the profits of another company, you're doing it yourself in similar locations. So that is really also, like, in the last couple of months, that's really started to come to the forefront.
Okay.
And I think my final point, really, Steve, unless there's any more questions, is that our approach, we believe that if you analyze your business using the ESOL model, so eliminate, standardize, optimize, automate, and roboticize, and you look through those 4 lenses, only then do you really achieve strategic transformation of your ROC model and your cost base. Well, really importantly, and the central theme for us, is you remain 100% aligned to your North Star, which is your customers.
Yeah, indeed. And interesting, Joe, thank you for that. And I guess we could talk a lot about this approach. I'm noticing a comment from somebody saying, yes, they're doing a lot of work on that automate and roboticize and some experimentation, but one of the challenges they're facing is scaling that up to a consistent program and then getting the benefits from it. So I guess when we come back around and talk about industries, maybe we'll touch back on that. But it's clearly we're seeing a progressive approach, looking at the 4 elements that and the lenses that Joe talked about as being a means to do it, and that boost that the digital workforce and the remote possibilities that we've now got. So we don't see boundaries is really helping to make driving the digital journey. Let's look at some examples now. In the opening introduction, I introduced Susan, and Susan, you're spending your time in consumer products, and I mentioned about the support you're giving to one of the masters of supply chain, and be interested to understand the kind of, and there's a question raised about, all very well talk about robots, but what about the human side of it? And interested to get your perspective from your examples there, please.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. Yeah, so I think as we touched on with others, consumer product companies by their very nature are sort of really focused on where the consumer and the customer is going, and there's been massive changes there. If I jump to what that has meant in terms of transformation for people within the organisation, the particular organisation I've been working with really invested heavily in building up communities that could understand new technology, were able to interpret data, to run analytics, to automate some of their decisions. They were able to look at processes end to end, and so with RPA, they were able to sort of see that they needed to look at the full spectrum. So they created quite a resilient workforce that is able to sort of be very responsive in these times, and they've really focused on what they called like democratization. So using digital and those techniques and putting it in the hands of people who are closest to the customer and to the consumer, who can make decisions sort of real time and very close. And that's actually, in terms of an operating model, is a massive shift, really, because operationally people were in consumer products companies very much looking at centralization, and now you can put a lot of that information and shift some of the costs to the people who can make decisions more appropriately and more accurately, and obviously huge degree of automation.
Yeah, so cost reduction while keeping one eye on the customer and so on. Brilliant. Thank you, Susan. We'll come back if we've got some more questions. But I guess, Chris, I trailed the work you're doing in utilities up front, and there's a question saying, when are we getting to Chris? I don't know if that's you're sending that question in, but what's happening? What have we done to make a digital utility? There's obviously someone in utilities that's very interested on that perspective.
Yeah, I've been caught out by my own question now. Yeah, look, I mean, cost pressure is certainly not something new for utilities, and that level of drive for operational excellence is always there. Every regulatory cycle, we get a continued push to kind of reduce TOTEX, or total expenditure, and improve cost to serve. I think what we're doing in utilities is particularly groundbreaking just now, and the areas that we're seeing most, if you remember Joe's kind of 4-quadrant model, is certainly in those top 2 tiers around intelligent process optimization and that legacy IT transformation. So some of the great examples that we're doing there, so we recently redesigned all the end-to-end processes and legacy IT around a customer obtaining a utility connection, for example, and that radically transformed that. So to Joe's point, pivoting on the customer North Star, developed a model which was entirely self-service and therefore drives quite significant cost transformation opportunities for the organization. And we're also seeing a lot of exploitation now of, as Joe mentioned, intelligent process automation, optimization rather, and automation. So increasing use of RPA, for example, in areas like how do I onboard customers more quicker and more effectively, which is one of the areas we won some awards in. But equally looking at how do we eliminate some of that waste in back office processing as well through that intelligent automation. So lots of exciting work going on in utilities. Certainly cost pressure is not something new to them. But I think what is new is the way that they're going about it, taking that more transformational lens about how they approach that. And as you mentioned at the start, we're currently helping build a truly digitally enabled water utility, for example, which is a radically different question to what we'd have answered 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing there is that they're thinking, or they have been thinking for a while now, about digital first. How can we do this? How do we get more customer self-service? How do we get a more engaging experience that against a real pressure? I know the particular area looking is they're desperate to get housing development, and it's been a real enabler to work with the construction industries and other service providers to just get connections, which is traditionally taken weeks and weeks to do, and lots of nugatory and non-value adding work. So really, that digital mindset, I think, applies to pretty much every industry.
Absolutely.
One of the areas that we're seeing, obviously, manufacturing and automotive. I mean, that's Etienne, that's an area that we work with a lot. I know you're working with particular industry players there in France. What are you seeing, and what are some of the big messages around cost transformation that you're seeing?
Well, Steve, you know what of the interesting part of this sector is the fact that the cost optimization and cost transformation is a quite major topic, I would say, in manufacturing sector. And with the COVID-19 impact, the questions was more how we go the step ahead and how do we reinvent some of the methods and approach that enable to transform this industry over the past years. I could give you 3 examples of trends we really think are significant in this sector currently. The first one is to move from, I would say, historical lean management and productivity enhancement to the next generation of Industry 4.0 with one golden word, I would say, within it, which is the data. How to get the right data, how to connect the machines, how to link those machines with the decision-making process to give the right levers and triggers to improve the whole processes and sites performance. That's the first trend. The second trend is interesting because it's not only focused within the company boundaries. It's really thinking about the whole value chain. And because of the already good level of performance and productivity of our manufacturing actors in France, but I think it's probably the same in Europe, we start thinking a bit broader and to think how to improve with the contractors, with our partners within a sector, how to improve cost and operating model to find, I would say, collective and collaborative ways, something which is in terms of DNA interesting as well, as it forces actors to play together and to fight together sometime within the market context. And last but not least, we know manufacturing sector is quite mature in terms of operations. We saw, and we had very interesting discussion with our clients, that they still have a potential area of improvement, applying all those good practices and ways to improve things to the support and enabling functions. And as Chris said just before, the COVID-19 reinforced, accelerate the fact that we can digitalize. There is a real business case, and there is also a people case when digitalizing some activities. This is not just about FTE or cost reduction. This is about focusing or ensuring that the people and the employees are really delivering high value added activities and giving the responsibility to low value added activities to IA or robots.
Yeah. Okay. Brilliant. I think it's an interesting one, and I guess the question maybe to Susan actually around. We had a question earlier come in around the research and development activity in engineering, which I think links to what Etienne was talking around the manufacturing ecosystems and the way they've been lean by design and so on around that. How do we go about, where do you start in engineering right now? Where do you start?
Yeah, so I think Etienne touched on it massively with data and digital twin. So a lot of costs historically have gone into prototypes and test trials, batches, and now big emphasis on being able to access all that information and run digital twins. So on the one hand, it's what can you see, what can you control in terms of the costs within manufacturing. I've been working with clients on that. And the second thing we've also been working with is how do you actually know what to make? We talked about customer and consumer centricity. How do you actually understand what customers are saying about your product, what they're saying about your competitor's product, and how do you get ahead of the curve to actually introduce the right products at the right time? And that agility is underpinned by the digital twin, and that leads to this transformation. And it also leads to a key aspect of this, which is the sustainability. So, which is absolutely critical. You touched on people. I mean, that's underpinned a lot of the work that I've been engaged with. But people in consumer products businesses are really heavily focusing on what that means for sustainability all around.
Okay, I mean, a lot of the themes there, we're working with, you talk about R&D, we're working with an aerospace company now, and that ability to put in the hands of the chief engineer the performance and the visibility across their supply chain of where they are in terms of design changes they make right the way through to the manufacturing. So that product design right the way through to how it's realized in the factory and designing that is a massive enabler for cost reduction and avoiding the challenges. So I think data is going to be a really big point for us, and knowing where the control points you've got to take really important also throughout your supply chain. We need to get into time now. Thank you for the questions we've got coming in. We'll follow up with some of those, but I think public sector is an interesting market, and for those of you that are interested, please do follow up with this. But what we're seeing in that space, I think it's fair to say, is some of the barriers that had interdepartmental business challenges where they wouldn't share, those are really being broken down, and so digital is a massive agenda there for cost reduction around that. But as we've got a few minutes left, Chris, I mean, what are you? I mean, we could talk for a long time around these different and drill into it. But what are you seeing as the sort of main points that you take from this that you've heard?
Yeah, so look, I mean, we're cognizant that entering into a transformational, cost transformational program can be quite daunting for many organizations, and it's a big program to tackle, which is where we helped. I think from our experience and what we've learned, there are probably 6 key principles that we'd encourage you all to think about on your cost transformation journeys. I'll kind of walk through each in turn. I guess the first of which is be holistic, or take a holistic approach. This is not about driving change in very siloed processes. That's typically where these things fail, but adopting that systems thinking approach and optimizing across functions will deliver the results. The next 2 are somewhat interlinked if you remember back to Joe's ESOR framework. So driving process excellence is really important. You can still improve what you already have, and we still see a place for the kind of elimination, standardization, and optimization of processes. So do work with what you've already got and try to improve that, but equally focus on digital enablement. So understand where we can drive levels of automation or roboticization, if that's even a word, into your processes as well. I think there's equally a place for agile. And that's not only the way that we do things, but thinking about the speed that we do things. So focus on getting those quick wins. A lot of our approach targets getting those results very early because it allows that adoption and buy-in to those transformation programs. But equally having a kind of almost targeted focus on value is really focusing on those elements which are going to drive the greatest level of benefit for your organization, and also being able to track, monitor, and report on those benefits as you go through the program. And last but not least, it's about being sustainable, both sustainable going beyond just the financial capital of cost reduction, but thinking about towards the kind of human, environmental, and societal capitals, and the way that you deliver your process is really important, because that is what's going to future-proof your operation. I don't know, perhaps you can share why Capgemini, we believe Capgemini can help.
Well, I think what's key for us and what we aim to do with our partners and clients is, I would say, to secure, to accelerate, and to unrisk such kind of transformation. To do so, we rely on three pillars, I would say. First one is to find the right combination and the right balance between the process approach, rational process approach, and digital enablement and digital enhancement, and finding with a not dogmatic approach the right balance. The second point is to really leverage and rely on assets. Assets are benchmarks. It can be factories, IT factories, RPA factories that are already working, that are already delivering value, and our willingness to support our clients is to give these services, this value added, thanks to already robust and well working assets and factories. And last but not least, positioning our employees and our customers' employees at the really center of the transformation. This is part of our DNA, part of Capgemini values, and definitely we believe that there is no sustainable transformation without avoiding putting the customers and the employees at the really center. This is the way we think it will be a success.
Brilliant. Well, thank you, and thank you. I think we've hit time. Thank you to my guest presenters today, and thank you for the attendees. As I mentioned, we'll record this. I think there are some strong messages about use digital, use those 4 levers. Don't just jump into experimentation, and think about how you scale up. As Etienne said, there's a people-centered approach, but drive it on real data and true assets around that. But we could certainly, if you are on a journey, as a number of you have identified, please do contact us. We'd be love to talk to you, share our experiences, and hopefully help. But that'd be great to reconnect with you. We'll follow up with a message back to you with the recording, and I wish you every success on your transformation and cost transformation journey. So all the best, and take care.